Today's question, is $1 million enough to retire, is one of the most common questions I've heard throughout my career. And I really debated answering it on the podcast because if I say there's no way, some people are going to panic and possibly stop doing what they're doing. If I say absolutely, some people are going to say great and think that's all they need to do. The reality of it is, it depends. And I hate that answer, but it's the truth. And as we go through this today, you're going to understand why. We're going to examine the question from several angles and considerations. And if you want to know how much money you need to retire, you are going to love today's episode. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Annette Bau, host of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast and founder of the Millionaire Insider. My mission is to help you simplify the money game so you can create a financially secure and fulfilled life without having to have a PhD or spend countless hours on your finances. You're going to learn how to think like a millionaire, stop worrying about money and wondering if your financial house is truly in order, and instead spend your time doing what you love. With over 3 decades advising 7, 8, and even 9-figure millionaires, and now joining that elite group, I'm in a unique position to help you make the best financial choices so you can create a secure financial future and retirement you love. This is the Wealth Inside and Out podcast. Retirement is a significant milestone and a new chapter in your life. Most people want to ensure that they have enough money in retirement so they don't run out of it or have to return to work. And if your plan is to continue working or return if you need to consider all the people who couldn't because of their health. In fact, one study shared that a large part of the labor problem after COVID was due to older workers who had gotten COVID and due to compromised health, were unable to continue working. So it's something you got to realize that you may want to work, and if you enjoy it, great. But relying on that as your source of income is not recommended. To access your free financial checkup, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/FC. Let's face it, most of us understand the importance of a medical checkup, and yet so few people do a financial checkup. A financial checkup, just like a medical checkup, makes sure you're on course to doing what you need to do to achieve your goals now as well as for the rest of your life. So again, I encourage you to access this and take the checkup. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/FC. Today's free resource is our retirement plan checklist. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/RPC. This checklist is a first step for you to start going through and look at different things you need to take into account and you need to make sure are taken care of before you retire. It's going to give you some thought-provoking insight that we have gleaned over literally a combined 80 years of working in this industry with several different advisors. So I encourage you to access this resource. You can access it at themillionaireinsider.com/RPC. All materials and intellectual property are copywritten by themillionaireseries.com. This information is not intended to replace any advisor or specialist or to provide any investment, financial, tax, retirement planning, or healthcare advice. All participants agree to hold millionaireseries.com and its affiliates harmless for results achieved or not achieved. For today's show notes, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/81. Not too long ago, $1 million in your retirement account was the ultimate goal. In fact, I can remember when I first learned about what a millionaire was when I was in high school, and that became my goal. It was one of the most exciting goals I ever set, and I was so excited to achieve it. Now the conversation is more in line with, is $1 million enough? And of course, it depends. But I want you to begin, first of all, before we start diving into determining if it is enough, I want you to fast forward to your retirement. And for 1 minute, I just want you to close your eyes and I want you to envision, what does your retirement look like? What are the feelings you have in retirement? Peace of mind, gratitude, abundance, flow, everything's great? Or do you feel anxious, worried, nervous, you don't have enough money? So I want you to get really clear on that because most of us want to have peace of mind, joy, being able to do what we want to do, spend time with family and friends, all those things. But I want you to think about that for 1 minute. And then what I want you to do is to identify the activities you're going to be partaking in retirement. How are you going to be spending your time? Are you going to be golfing, getting massages, hiking? Is it something that's expensive or something that's pretty much free? Got to look at that. Are you going to be traveling? If so, where to and how much is that going to cost? What about spending time with family and friends? Well, there's no right or wrong. The secret is to get clear on what you want and then create a plan to make it a reality. So I want to repeat that again. The secret to a successful retirement is to get clear and then create a plan to make it a reality. That, my friends, is a $1 billion nugget. And the sooner you do it, the easier it's going to be. I also want to just reiterate that I see so many stories and hear so many stories about people being concerned about running out of money. I just want to really reiterate that people don't wake up broke one day. They make choices every day that determine where they're going to be financially, now as well as in retirement. So it's not just kind of like you wake up and, oh, I'm broke. No, the choices you're making today is what's dictating if you're going to be broke in retirement or you're going to be loving life. So you just got to be really clear on that. And that's why it's so important that you create a plan. So I want to share a story with you before we begin. When our kids were young, we'd always take a major summer vacation. And normally we would go to Hawaii or somewhere really fun. But this year we decided to rent an RV. We had a huge RV and we decided to drive up the coast to California. Now, I remember thinking this was the dumbest decision we could have made because literally gas was at the all-time high. It was like over $5 a gallon. And this was several years ago, like over 10 years ago, maybe even 12. We spent like $6,000 in gas. And I just remember we continued to have our credit card shut off because they thought it was fraud. And I had to call like literally every day and say, turn our credit card back on. We're traveling up the coast. But we met this couple that was traveling in their RV. And they shared that traveling in their beautiful RV during retirement had been their lifelong dream. And I thought, how fun and what a great way to spend retirement. And they had a beautiful RV. It was just amazing. When I asked where they were heading, they said as far north as they could until they ran out of money because of gas. So they were going to go up until they had spent half of their money, knowing that the other half would then be spent on the gas to get them home. And I sat there and I was like, oh my God, I was thinking, how depressing. You're retired and you can't afford to travel because of the cost of gas. So they got part of the first formula correct, right? Getting really clear on what does an amazing retirement look like? Traveling, going where you want to go, seeing places they've never been. So we got to get really clear on our goal. But then they missed the second part is how they were going to pay for it. We got to make sure that we're clear on what we want. And then we got to have a plan on what we need to do to be able to pay for it. Now, this is really important. If you determine as we go through this that you don't have enough money, then you do need to continue working or you need to downsize your lifestyle. So you've got to figure that out because there's just no free lunch. If you don't, then you will be in the statistics that run out of money. And there's just nothing fun about that. Not having enough money. I've never seen anyone that doesn't have enough money that's got happiness, peace of mind, is enjoying their life. It's just miserable. And so don't let that be you. Today, we're going to, first of all, dive into some considerations to answer the question if $1 million is enough money, specifically when it is enough and when you'd be okay if you have less and when you need more. And then I'm going to dive into an actual real world plan so you can kind of see how I think and you can review your situation so you can determine what will work for you. So the first consideration is, I think, one of the most important ones, and it's the cost of living and where you're going to live. So let's start by looking at where you're going to live, because where you're going to live is going to impact how much it costs for housing, healthcare, and everyday expenses. Now, typically, rural communities, especially like in the Midwest, are typically cheaper than places like LA, Phoenix, New York. Living in a smaller town generally just has a lower cost of living, and it makes it easier to retire on less money. Whereas metropolitan areas, cities typically have higher expenses for housing, entertainment, transportation. They also have more amenities for healthcare, and that comes with a premium. If you look at a lot of rural communities, healthcare is a challenge. In fact, I just was listening to a woman that was saying how many OBGYNs have left the state of Idaho. Now she lives there and she said people that are want to have babies are having trouble even getting health care. And so you got to look into those. You may not be in the market for having a baby, but you may be in the market for making sure you've got a really solid OBGYN. So you've got to look into that and make sure that wherever you're looking at moving, you can get the coverage at a price you can afford. Now, some people elect to move overseas, right? Because they think it's cheaper. That's not always the case. We own a condo outside the United States. While the condo was cheaper than it would have been, say, in locations, it's got a panoramic view of the ocean. It's incredible. That was cheaper, but really nothing else is. Food is more expensive. In fact, we typically take food down there, but on the times where I've had to go get food, it's literally the food that I eat, because I eat pretty healthy, and the foods that I get are significantly more expensive. Maintenance is high, supplies are high. So you've got to do your research. Some services are cheaper: massages, internet, labor, and then, as I mentioned, rent. So you just got to be aware of it. You also need to look at healthcare as well as cultural differences and visa regulations. Our neighbors in Phoenix moved to Canada. They're living half the year in Canada and then half the year in Bordeaux, France. One of the things they said is they're only having to pay $150 a month for healthcare. And I thought, wow, that is unbelievable. Again, you've got to look at what would work for you. They happen to be Canadian, so they already speak French. So that makes it a little bit easier. But you just need to make sure that wherever you're going to live is the right spot, and it's not just kind of like you're hoping it is. I encourage you to take an extended vacation and just try it out before you uproot your life. Again, I cannot stress the importance of doing a test run on retirement before you actually make it permanent. Determining where you're going to live and determining when you're going to retire and how that all works together. I look at so many people that have retired in the course of my career, and literally, some of them have literally died within the year. And I think it's like they went from doing something, having a purpose, to not. So you just got to take those things into account and be really clear on what you love doing, how you want to spend your time. And then you want to make sure that you're choosing a location that includes those activities. Like if you enjoy hiking, you want to be somewhere where you can hike. Now, I enjoy hiking, but I enjoy hiking on the beach. I also love hiking in the mountains. Our three homes work great for us. Now, our second home is a country club up in the mountains of northern Arizona. I was recently talking with two different couples in two different scenarios, and both commented about the number of people who are majoring in drinking in retirement, like alcohol. I was kind of laughing because they were completely independent. And one said his parents actually sold their place because they were on a country club and just the entire focus was drinking. Actually, there's three. Another one was talking about it, who spends a lot of time up here because we have a country club, and saying we just drink so much when we're up here. And then another one actually that I know lived more south, but they moved from the country club for the same reason, because the entire focus was on drinking. The one thing I encourage you to do, obviously having an occasional drink is not going to probably be a problem, but excessively drinking daily is. So you just got to be aware of it. All right. And so make sure that whatever it is you want to do, that's what you are going to be doing in retirement and that it's going to work for you. The next thing to look at is inflation. What you need to understand about inflation is that when it increases, it erodes purchasing power, meaning $1 is not going to be worth $1. So it's going to cost more. It's going to cost more for bread. It's going to cost more for milk. It's going to cost more for fruit, for vegetables, whatever you eat. And that can cause a problem with having enough money for retirement. Now, many people think inflation is really high right now, right? Because prices are really high. It's actually like 2.3%, and the average is 3%. And so it really does make a point for price gouging, because if you look at stocks, they're at an all-time high. And those of us that are invested in stocks can't believe how much they've gone up. So, there is that argument, which I think is realistic, and I think it's true. But the bottom line is you've got to plan for inflation in retirement. Assuming you have a 3% inflation rate, which is what it's been over the average. So right now it's lower, but let's say it goes a little higher, and you have $1 million, you would need 1.8 million in 2 decades from now to have the same amount of money. That means if you plan to retire in 20 years, you might need an extra 800,000 to maintain what $1 million will buy you today. So it's something you've definitely got to take into account. For this reason, it's critical that you create a plan that can mitigate the effects of inflation, such as investing in assets that historically outpace inflation, like stocks and real estate. But again, always use a qualified advisor. If you have questions on this, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/SR or support-request. The next factor to take into account are taxes. We've got state taxes, meaning for what you earn, as well as federal taxes. And then we also have property taxes, and that's something to take into account. Some people move places where they don't have to pay state taxes. And I feel really strongly about this. If you're moving somewhere that you don't pay state taxes and you love it, then great. But if not, then I would encourage you to really reconsider it, because I think that's something that probably shouldn't be the only determining factor of where you move. There's also money that you get from income that is taxed differently. You've got your wages that are taxed as ordinary income, as well as short-term capital gains tax, meaning if you invest in a stock and you hold it less than a year, it's going to be a short-term capital gain. Dividends and interest are also taxed as ordinary income. Whereas if you hold an asset longer than a year, real estate or stocks, then it's considered long-term capital gain, and that's at a lower tax rate. Now, I dive into considerations that I'm taking and how I'm reallocating my money in retirement in episode 76, where I really share insight on what I'm doing. And a large part of that includes tax planning. One of the things that I prefer is investing retirement funds that are going to be in guaranteed income to coordinate that with RMD. Now, typically, you wouldn't put retirement monies in an annuity because they both grow tax deferred. The reason that I like this strategy is because when I started really looking at this several years ago, what I realized is that if you want guaranteed income and you understand that once the market goes to a certain level, it's likely going to adjust and maybe go down, you are forced to take RMD. So you have to take it out. So if you invest your personal monies in an annuity so that you can have a guaranteed income, you're going to be forced to take those out too. So now you've got your RMD and you have your annuity money coming in. You're going to be taxed. Both of them are going to be taxed to ordinary income. Whereas if you have your annuities inside of a qualified account like an IRA, then when you get your RMD, that will be taxed as ordinary income. But then your personal money can be invested in stocks or real estate or whatever works with your situation. And when you sell that, as long as you hold it for over a year, it's subject to long-term capital gains rates, which are currently less than ordinary income. The one thing I want to say in all of this, I'm giving you my opinion and what I do and my thoughts, but it's based on a person's situation. I don't know about your situation, so it's imperative that you have somebody review your situation before you start making any choices. And you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/SR or themillionaireinsider.com/support-request if you have specific questions. In episode 76, I dive into this in much more detail. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/76. Now let's look at some lifestyle and spending habits, which have such a dramatic impact on how much money you need in retirement. A retiree who consciously spends, follows their plan, and avoids extravagant expenses is much more likely to be able to retire successfully on $1 million. An individual with a luxurious lifestyle is much more likely to overspend and struggle financially if they don't have significantly more money. So you got to be aware of it. And what you got to look at is needs versus wants. Essential expenses are needs, which include housing, insurance, food, healthcare, transportation. And these are non-negotiable costs that every retiree is going to have, unless you're going to be living with your family or you have a different situation. Whereas want spending is more in line with things that you desire: entertainment, dining out, travel, hobbies. It's very important that you understand the difference between a need and a want expense. And when we get into the real world example, you're going to have those numbers. So you can be thinking about that. Let's talk for 1 minute about budgeting and discipline. Creating and sticking to a spending plan is absolutely critical. And it probably is the most important aspect of determining how much money you need in retirement. Obviously, if you spend more and you don't have as much discipline, you need more. It requires that you really do pay attention to what's going on, that you review your expenses, that you make real time adjustments, and that you avoid excessive spending for you and or your partner. Now, if you or your partner has a tendency of overspending, I encourage you to incorporate the 3-day rule. You can go to themillionaireinsider.com/36 to learn more. But basically, what it does is it teaches you how to avoid impulse buys, and which is so critical in retirement. And it's important that you learn it now. So then in retirement, you're okay. I mean, that's a big one because when you're working, it's not typically as big of a deal as it is when you're on a fixed income and you can't make up for it. Retirees who manage their finances well are much more likely to make their savings last throughout their retirement. And there's nothing fun, as I said previously, about running out of money or being forced to go back to work. And oftentimes people can't. So it's really important that you make your budget a priority. You also need to take into account healthcare costs. This is one of the biggest concerns that causes so many problems for people financially, including bankruptcy. You also need to plan for long-term care, and that's going to get more expensive as you get older. And one of the most important things you got to consider, like when you're looking at where you're going to live, is what is the cost of healthcare and is it available? Obviously, most people in retirement have access to Medicare as well as supplemental insurance. And so that's going to help with the healthcare costs. But there are out-of-pocket expenses such as deductibles, co-pays, and uncovered services that aren't covered. You got to plan for those as well as long-term care. And that's why a lot of people will get insurance. And I really encourage you, if you're going to get long-term care insurance, you got to be working with a qualified person, but you got to look at different options. A lot of people are choosing hybrids just because they are so much cheaper than a traditional plan. Traditional plan typically pays more, but premiums are generally going to be more expensive and are going to oftentimes increase. So you got to plan for that. You also have to look at your health and longevity. Possibly the biggest risk, especially for us women, is longevity risk. And individuals' life expectancy and where they are from a health perspective are major considerations when it comes to how much money you need for retirement. That's why it's so important that you create a plan to make sure you're not going to run out of money. Another consideration is your investment strategy. You got to realize that how your investments perform is going to dramatically impact how much money you have in retirement. Some people are more diversified, have more balanced portfolio, whereas other ones have more growth. In the past, having a more growth-oriented portfolios won the game. That's not saying it's going to in the future. That's why it's so important that you've got to look at how you should be invested based on your age, your risk tolerance, when you're going to retire, how much money you're going to inherit, if anything, all those factors. And what I encourage you to do is to really look at what percentage you should have in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cash, equivalents, or even alternative investments, maybe even real estate. A qualified advisor can help. And again, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/SR for support-request. You also want to look at additional income sources. For example, passive and residual income sources are a great way to ensure that you're going to have enough money in retirement. Now, the typical one is Social Security, right? And I, along with many experts, believe that Social Security is going to be there. It just may be less. And I think it's a big problem because so many people are reliant on Social Security. In fact, studies show that 40% of people, that's their sole source of retirement income. My peers and I think it's higher. Somebody has a really small pension, then they say, well, they're not solely relying on Social Security. Boy, I have known and heard stories about so many people that are relying on Social Security. So it's something you got to be aware of if you are planning or need Social Security in retirement. And most people do. The amount you get from Social Security is going to depend on factors such as how long you've worked, how much you've made, and your age, and when you claim the benefits. I really encourage you to maximize your Social Security benefits. We did an entire episode on this titled When You Should Take Your Social Security Benefits, and you can access it at themillionaireinsider.com/70. That episode really helps you look at all the considerations to take. Sometimes people should take it early. Sometimes people should wait. So you got to look at all the big picture before you make a decision on that. And you don't take it just because you feel like it. In fact, an example that Susan, who I interviewed for that episode, shared is that one client, by waiting to take it, actually got $500,000 more than if he would have taken it early. So it's huge, and you got to be aware of that. The other consideration are guaranteed income streams. Annuities can be a really effective strategy to generate guaranteed income because they can help to ensure you're not going to run out of money. And some of them also offer long-term care benefits. But it's imperative, again, that you work with a qualified advisor before investing in any retirement accounts, investments, annuities, anything. Pensions are a great example. Rental income can be maybe even part-time work. But you got to look at different aspects to determine what works for you. One of the women I know that is a member at my country club, she doesn't have to work. She has a ton of money, but she works part-time because it allows her to stay socially active and to have something to do. So again, if you're able to, that is a great option. But the key is to diversify your income sources so you're not just completely reliant on one source of income, and you have a buffer if you have unexpected expenses. All right, now I want to give you a real world situation. When you create your plan, you've got to determine, first of all, are you looking at before tax numbers or after tax? So, for example, if you need $10,000 a month before tax, pre-tax, and your effective tax rate is going to be 25%, then you're going to have a need of about $2,500 a month for taxes. So that's going to mean you have a net of $7,500. I just want you to be aware of that. Now let's shift the example and say that you determine that after tax you need $12,000. So you need a little bit more money than in the previous example. You know that either you or your partner is going to get $3,000 a month from Social Security, and the other one's going to get $2,000. So that's a total of $5,000, meaning that the net amount you're going to need if both partners are alive is $7,000. In the event that one partner dies and the other has not remarried and is over 60, then they are going to need $9,000 a month. All right. So just keep that in your mind. We're going to assume that Social Security is guaranteed just because there are so many people that are relying on it for their retirement. In this example of the $12,000 after tax, let's assume that the $6,000 after tax you need, that $6,000 is for need-based expenses, housing, taxes, insurance, utilities, food, and $6,000 is for want-based expenses, entertainment, travel, shopping, etc. If you don't have any other guaranteed income or pensions or a guaranteed life annuity, I recommend that you're going to invest another $3,000 to cover your need-based expenses. You already have $3,000 that's going to come from Social Security. You need another $3,000. Depending on you and your partner's age, this amount is going to vary dramatically. For my partner and me, the amount to generate an extra $3,000 a month or $36,000 a year is about $250,000 lump sum. Again, this number is probably arbitrary for you because you got to look at the numbers and you got to look at your picture to make sure it's accurate. My preference, this is mine, you got to determine that, is that the entire amount of money you need, the after-tax money, the $12,000, is that it is covered by guaranteed income, whether it's a pension, whether it's Social Security, or it's a guaranteed lifetime annuity. I prefer that. Now, you may not be able to afford that. So what you have to understand is if you can't afford it, then what's going to happen is you're going to have your base expenses paid for, and then you're going to have to say no to some of the entertainment, travel, shopping, dining out, things you want to do. So you got to just be aware of it. There's not a right or a wrong, but you got to determine, can you live with that? And if you say, no, I want to travel, I want to do this, then you're either going to have to continue working, or you're going to have to make sure you have enough money that you can invest in guaranteed lifetime income without putting yourself in a bind where you've got too much in it and you don't have enough liquidity. So someone's got to look at your big picture and make sure that you have the right mix. For us, in my situation, as I mentioned, so we have all of our after-tax need met with guaranteed income from Social Security, pension, and then guaranteed life annuity. So all the extra money we earn in our investments, now for us, it is significant, but all that money we can either just accumulate and leave to our kids, or we can take, say, a major family vacation or do whatever we choose to do. What we want and need monthly is going to be there in guaranteed money. So that's my ideal scenario. Some people can't do that. So if you can't do that, that's fine. You just got to figure out what you can do and make sure that you're balancing all of those ratios, meaning from a perspective of you don't have too much locked into guaranteed income and you don't have enough liquidity if you need it. But once you know your bottom line, you will know with pretty much certainty whether or not $1 million is enough or if you need more or less. And this is true regardless of if you have $100,000 saved, 1 million, 10 million, or 100 million. It's irrelevant. The same formula will apply. Now, if you need help determining your number, you can go to themillionaireinsider.com/support-request. So there you have it. So let's recap. Determining how much money is enough depends on many factors, including income, living expenses, inflation, lifestyle choices, as well as healthcare needs. Proper planning and financial management are essential to creating a financially secure retirement you love. As a retiree, you should always consider hiring a financial advisor who can assist you in developing a plan that's customized to you and that can help you not only to create the plan, but then stick to the plan so that you don't worry or have to experience running out of money. I really encourage you to go back and listen, re-listen, and more importantly, take action. And I will say this much, the best time to plan for retirement is yesterday. The next best time is today. The key is just to start and figure out what you can do as far as saving more, investing more, and spending less. You're going to be so glad you did. If you love the content of this podcast, please follow and subscribe to our channel so you get notified of episodes, and also give us a 5-star review and share a comment. We really appreciate it. Congratulations on taking another step to create a financially free life you love. If you're not sure about your financial future or that it's in order, or you are ready to stop worrying about money or possibly the fear of becoming a bag lady, ending up broke in retirement, or you simply are ready to know your financial house is in order so that you can have a bright financial future, please go to themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. And that doesn't stand for non-sufficient funds. It stands for Next Step Finance. It's the next best step of what you need to do so you can avoid an NSF notice in your future. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. The number of women who were not broke or poor while working or married is staggering. The entire mission of the Wealth Inside and Out podcast is to ensure you have the information for you, your family, your friends, anyone who's willing to listen to it and apply it so that you can create a financially free life you love. Again, themillionaireinsider.com/NSF. Until our next episode, take one action that will help you create a financially free life you love. I'm Annette Ba'u, your host. All international copyrights are reserved. Bye for now.